Hello and welcome back to the Dynasty Grind. My name is Peter Howard at PA Howdy on Twitter and Threads and everywhere else you need an app. Today is the Lonley stream, or one of the many, or one of the few. Actually, it's rare. I'm by myself because of the Expo. Just another reason to hit it, in my opinion. Zach and Dynasty Outhouse are unavailable. I think Dynasty Outhouse is going to the Expo. I imagine he would. He'd make time for that. Not me. Not this stream. But the Expo, he'll make time for. So it's just going to be me. So you can all click off now, frankly. Outside of that, welcome to the Dynasty Grind. It's a live stream or in this case, just I do every Wednesday at 9:30 till I run out of question, thoughts, energy, or really. And to talk about anything fantasy football, Dynasty fantasy football related, drop whatever questions, comments, or thoughts you have about those topics, preferably, on whatever box, whatever streaming platform we happen to be on provides you, and I'll be happy to, chat with you about that for a while. That's about it. Let's do it. How's it going? Yeah, it's just me, so I don't expect this one will last too long. Everyone's here for Zach. We all know that. But yeah, I want to keep up the tradition, as it were, of only having missed one show because of the last FF. No, because I went on vacation, something like that. Sorry, my staff are out, so I'm having to do all the tweets by myself today. How do you spell his name? I actually meant to record a podcast. I know, weird today, but I forgot to do that too. So, behind the eight ball in all sense, which is just on brand. Is there anyone out there? I haven't even checked. Hey, Toronto Dave, how you doing? Anything new? Are you going to the Expo? I think you went last year, didn't you? I think I'm the only one not there. I've got a lot of messages. I am not checking out on Twitter a lot. Anyone else see constantly that you're being followed by new people and yet your number never goes up? I check it. Not that it weighs particularly heavy on my mind, but it's been the exact same follow account for like 200 notifications of new person following you. Sorry, it's been a while since I was on here. So, all right, JC Troller, how you doing, buddy? You're going? All right, have fun. Say hi to Zach and Dynasty Outhouse for me. You'll see them more than I do this week. What even is Fantasy Football Expo? I didn't know. I'll be honest with you. I didn't know what an expo was, let alone a fantasy football one. It's essentially like a convention. If you've ever been to a jobs fair, there's a little snake-like path through a whole bunch of tables where different websites or sources or products set up their little booth, and they tell you all about what they do in fantasy football, or how good their ranks are and why you should follow them, or how you can get involved, or stuff like that. What the Expo actually is a bunch of events. One, it's all centered around that little snake-like path around a whole bunch of tables where people tell you about what they do. But there's also a whole bunch of events. I'm not sure what's going on this year, but sorry, I just realized I spilled my coffee and I got to tidy that up. Like at the Hall of Fame, there's a little field and they do a Hall of Fame tag football. I think I didn't take part in it, but there's also, you get a free ticket to go tour the Hall of Fame. And people hang in and around the hotel, go to the local eateries, and right in the center there of the town, depending on where they're actually having the main expo, because I think they had to move hotels, but it was in walking distance when I went. There's a nice little courtyard where everyone ended up most nights either playing not hacky sack, what do they call it? Cornhole, the one John Bosch really likes, and just hanging out and drinking if that's your fare. From a little Havana-like stand and just having fun talking about fantasy football. Honestly, that's really the main expo. It's just everyone you meet online and talk to online, doing stuff like this, hanging out, getting to know each other in person instead of just being online friends a little bit. But there's a whole bunch of cool stuff at those booths. Don't get me wrong. They hand out free T-shirts, like they're free T-shirts. That's where half my collection of T-shirts came from at this point, I think. And yeah, it's nice to meet people in person for the first time. Like Ryan McDowell, he's one of the founding fathers of DLF. I've been working for them for years, and he lives about an hour down the road, and I never met him. I had to go all the way to the Expo to meet him. That's basically what the Expo is. It's a bunch of us geeks trying to actually be not online for a minute. It can be a lot of fun. I don't like people or crowds, though, so I went to see Zach and Russ, and it was fun. But mostly I'm not going back. With all the trade rumors surrounding Ayuk going to weaker offenses, should we panic or should we panic? Fair question with few positive options. What I'd say is I start from a different premise, which is what is Ayuk? I've been meaning to go back over this research before, but I don't think at the point of his career arc, in terms of career year, his chances of breaking out at a higher level for fantasy football purposes, not for relevance to the NFL or his paycheck or anything actual meaningful like that, is decreasingly likely. Most players who break out into the top 12 do it by year 3 at least. I think year 3 is the most common top 12 breakout year, actually. Year 2 is not far behind. That's why year 2 is really good, because it's also like the most likely top 24 breakout year when lots of value jumps and volume jumps happen. Now, that says nothing about Ayuk, because we're just comparing what has happened with a whole bunch of players who were nothing like Ayuk, right? Because every person's a snowflake in the positive sense. But I start from the premises. The only reason I think I do anything a little bit differently than anyone is I found out what happens most often, given very reasonable criteria: career year, age, previous performance, as measures on some comparable scale, even though I'm not saying top 24 and top 12 is some indefinite, perfect definition of breakout or not, but it's something that I can reliably look at year over year and think I'm comparing apples to apples more so than most definitions or most easy definitions I can come up with. So I think he's a top 24 player for fantasy with a lot of skill. He can definitely provide top 12 weeks. We've seen that upside even through stretches of a season. And I like him a lot. I don't think he's in much worse trouble, given that no matter what offense he lands on, if you know what I mean. Most offenses can produce a top 24 player if they have a player capable of monopolizing targets essentially to that degree, which Ayuk definitely is. Could we see a lowering of his ceiling on a week-to-week game in terms of best ball if he goes to a bad offense? Yes, but do remember that adding a good player improves an offense. That's not everything. One player rarely makes an offense great, let's say Calvin Johnson or Le'Veon Bell or Christian McCaffrey, frankly. The rare birds, as it were. So I don't think his median outcome changes a lot. You might have to be a little more unsure of his ceiling outcome, depending on where he goes. But I think his ceiling outcome is generally, depends who you are, right? If you're in the truther camp, he is, because of what I know about that person specifically, he's different than most players entering this career year with this level of history, and therefore he can break out, which is perfectly reasonable. It happens. Like 30% of breakouts are just unchartable in that way, and he's not even in that 30% group. Like something like 40% of breakouts in the top 12 happen outside of that year 2, year 3 most common arc I'm talking about. So I'm not saying it's entirely impossible, but if you're already in that camp, I think you should be more worried about that top 12 potential. I think that's reasonable. But I already am, and so probably wouldn't change where I am on Ayuk much, but that's where I started off with. It depends on who you are. If you're more in that truther Ayuk, he really can. He just hasn't yet. Comparing him to the average is incorrect because he ain't average. Just, again, perfectly reasonable take. Then yeah, maybe the team he lands on could be more concerning. But we are also surprised every year by some teams that we think of as more competitive than they're not. Houston comes to mind. The Bills were the Jets. The Jets are still the Jets, but it was the Bills and Jets. Let's not forget, when we and you have been playing, they were the two no man's land. You didn't want anyone to go there for quite a while. And it turned around, principally because of a new quarterback who could essentially in both cases, we didn't really think they could get it done the way they did. So there's always hope, right? That your stars can turn around in an instant, and having Ayuk does help whatever offense he goes to. Outside of that, I would say trade rumors in general, even though the NFL is getting more, I would say it's a good thing for the NFL and the game, more movement happy, players moving around to other teams more often, more commonly in their prime, as Ayuk definitely is. I would still say I'm still on the wait till something happens before you have a reaction, because the NFL typically, even though it's getting more so, typically relatively little happens with the trade talks, right? Or the trade rumors, or we spend all off season theorizing and getting in the weeds and getting out the red cotton lines and joining one picture to the other. And then what happens is largely a little of nothing. So until something happens, I wouldn't move your estimation of him too much at all. And so the only caution I have is the first thing, where I think I'm a tiny bit lower on relative to some people on Ayuk already. Yeah. 12 teams who flex start 10. Here I was worrying I wouldn't be able to carry an hour-long, let alone 3-hour-long stream without Zach Reed or Russ. And then I remember I talk like I'm oxygen's going out of fashion and I got to use it all. I don't actually like to talk. When I get on these things, I tend to answer in essays. Sorry about that, Baker Kid. 12 teams who flex start 10 tight end premium. And this is to move off Caleb. Caleb Williams for Purdy, who's a good value in Dynasty. I would say that's a good quarterback to add in a trade for Williams in general, because he was top 12 last year and he can do that again. He's on a good offense to offer a counterpoint to what I just said. So it's a good start. Plus 125 first and a 25 second. I don't think it's quite enough, depending. If you like to project the 25 first and you think it's pretty sure a top 3, I would say that's probably too early to be so sure. But yeah, maybe if it's a top 3, top 5 pick in 25, if you felt very confident in that, I might think I'm giving up a little value, but I'm obfuscating some risk there, and that top 5 pick is shiny. I think it's not quite there, but it's not far off. I don't hate it, but mainly because I think Purdy's a little undervalued, but not enough, if you know what I mean. I'd much rather trade back a step in the draft and get Daniels plus something, anything. Because Caleb Williams' ceiling is what Purdy did last year, but if Caleb Williams does what Purdy did last year, he's going to be a lot higher valued in Dynasty. It's the Dak versus Joe Burrow conundrum, right? Dak's been doing it for longer than Joe Burrow has, with a similar range of outcomes throughout, not in terms of real football, there's no Super Bowls, but in terms of fantasy, actually slightly better ceiling for at least a couple years. But Dak's value arc was slower. It rose up exponentially when he first had a good season because he was so low drafted, and that doesn't happen with quarterback a lot. But then it peaked at a lower rate and never really got up to where Joe Burrow is, which is this constant top 5, top 6, top 7 pick in Dynasty Superflex. Dak never really got there. And I'm comparing them to Purdy and Williams. Like, I think if Williams does anything like Purdy does over the next 2 years, his value skyrockets over what Purdy's could ever be, which we pay attention to because we're degenerate Dynasty players and value's a thing. So I would factor that in with this trade. I think on a pure what you get for your fantasy team, it's not too bad. But from a Dynasty perspective, yeah, I think you're giving up a little too much sauce, but it's not too far off for me. If that was Dak, who I like Purdy, don't get me wrong, but Dak's had that top 5 upside. He's a little more established. There's a little less chance that Dak doesn't find a job over the next 3 years and Purdy does, just because the way San Francisco churns talent effectively somehow, and where Purdy was so low drafted, that's where that comes in. So yeah, maybe you're giving up a little too much sauce, but I don't hate it. John Bosch FF, and sometimes you get to share a room with Peter at the Expo. Yeah, especially when Peter books a hotel that said it was very close, but it turns out not, and the parking lot to get to it is like driving through a war-torn country. The bumps on that parking lot at the Holiday Inn were crazy. My wife's minivan were not liking it, so I ended up crashing wherever John had rented a house as a sensible more affluent individual could and should, and just crashing at their house and eating Bob's barbecue. That was honestly the highlight of the expo for me. John let me go to that house and everyone was just hanging out and Bob cooked. And don't get me wrong, every event at the expo is wonderful. Go meet the people, walk around, take part in everything they set up as an event. But if you get the opportunity just to be in a space with a whole bunch of fantasy football nerds, I don't know what your life is like, but there's no one I meet on a daily basis who literally knows what fantasy football really is. Or cares about it. From my family to every person I meet that I don't know to every person that I meet that I do know. So just to be able to be in a space with people that, even if we're not talking about it, we all know what CMC does. We all know. Is relatively fun. Plus, they tend to be very nice, charming, and fun individuals to be around. If you get that chance at the expo, someone says we're going somewhere to get something to eat, just go get something to eat. Don't worry about missing one of the events, even though they're all wonderful. They do panels, and I watched Dynasty Outhouse be part of a panel. Scott Connor was talking about the value of running back starts, and I found all that as a Dynasty nerd immeasurably fun. But if you get the chance to just hang out with people who enjoy fantasy football, to go out to eat or just hang in that little square, that was the highlight for me. And that's the only reason I'd consider going back. Not that the events aren't great. I'm not an event person, you know. If you could pick one analyst to be doing a Wednesday live stream with, who would it be? That's a tough one. JJ Zachariason. Probably JJ Zachariason. Yeah. No. Zach Reed of the Tacit Assassin variety, obviously. Toronto Dave. Okay, taking it easy on me today. I appreciate that, Dave. Bit of a low, lonely stream. 2 lemons, 2 party hat guys, and 2 hearts. I appreciate it. And Tacit Assassin chimes in with 2 extra party hat guys, 2 devil symbols, which seems a little ominous. Ominous? Yeah, that's the right word. A lemon and a 3rd extra party hat guy. Appreciate it. More devil. I feel like I'm in on a private conversation at this point. I want to add a 2nd to Williams and get Purdy and 2 firsts if I can. Yeah, that would be an even source, and you're still getting the same thing, the value of the points. And honestly, if Purdy repeats anything like what he did last year, he'll have a Dak arc where suddenly he's actually respected Dynasty asset. He's probably not going to drop off the map. I know it's silly to some people, and it should be, that Purdy would suddenly not be the San Francisco 49ers QB on that great offense with a good coach who can score points. But we're always a little trepidatious about it when it doesn't come with draft capital. We just are. Mainly because we've been Trey Mason so many times. And so anything like a decent year this year, just a Kirk Cousins level year, an Andy Dalton level year, and Purdy's value will settle down. And even if Williams hits, you're still getting pretty good, something pretty good. Exchanging fair value, moving your points per game up. Yeah, that would be better. What's your thoughts on these wide receivers? I assume you're really asking Zach, and that's perfectly fine. I just read the questions right here. And in your opinion, the likelihood of them being startable on a week-to-week basis, which is a really interesting question when you think of consistency. So it's not something I subscribe to as being necessary or really worth making decisions over. But the week-to-week basis, we play a week-to-week game, is interesting to consider that. Michael Wilson, Dontavian Wicks, and Josh Palmer. I think Wilson's the most interesting. Again, I am anything but an age truther. I don't just draft young players. Not that it's not great. I mean, I come from DLF, and I just mentioned Ryan McDowell. Progressive struggle is a thing because it works. But I would say I do chase breakouts, players doing more than they've previously done before. And like you said, especially at wide receiver through the first 2, maybe 3 seasons, Michael Wilson's more in that mark. Dontavian Wicks is, but I think Michael Williams achieved more according to those baseline variables I was talking about than Wicks. From a real talk perspective, Josh Palmer is much more likely to be the replaceable but stalwart journeyman NFL wide receiver, because that's what he's been, who's capable of doing more than you think when the situation arises. He's a very capable receiver in the role that he's given. Let's not forget that. So if you're looking for the net neutral, Josh Palmer is probably more startable for sure on a week-to-week basis. But you don't want that in fantasy football in general. Michael Wilson had that last year. I could look it up, but my stream will crash because my internet connection. and running a sheet at the same time, forget it. But if memory serves, he finished in the top 36, had a number of top 24 weeks, and produced a fairly nice points per game when you compare his rookie season to other wide receiver rookie seasons. Am I expecting DK Metcalf or even Brandon Ayuk for Michael Wilson? No. But I think he, and a little above him, I like him a little more, Josh Downs, did a remarkably good impersonation of what a good rookie wide receiver season is before they progress into higher volume, become more fantasy viable on a week-to-week basis. So Michael Wilson is the most interesting name on this list to me. Josh Palmer is probably the medium bet, but you don't want that in fantasy football. Dontavian Wicks is the flyer that some people think has a lot more ceiling than anything I described. Now, I would point out that all these are value. Dontavian Wicks is so low drafted and so low valued in trade most of the time. In your league, he might cost a first, in which case, no. But according to ADP and the trade value charts I see, he's like a third round pick. And you have fun. You watch the game. If you think Wicks looks like that guy, perfectly reasonable value, especially with that ceiling. But I think Michael Wilson is more likely to have a better level of fantasy viability and dynasty value increase of all three. And I think his value is also slightly behind that potential. So Wicks probably has a ceiling, but I think it's much less likely he produces anything than he produces, let alone producing at that ceiling. Michael Wilson's the best of both worlds, right? His ceiling isn't as high, but his median is higher than Palmer's, and the likelihood of getting there is a lot better, in my opinion, than Wicks's. A lot of that is based on what I thought of them college profile-wise, or at least Wicks and Michael Wilson is, and you'd have to go back and look at my notes and my sheets for those. But that's where I'm at. I think Wilson's going to be your best bet, especially in Dynasty. If you're looking for a redraft, I'd probably still rather Wilson where his ADP is in redraft. But I think Wicks might be more tempting because you're really just looking for the points upside there. And I think, Wicks probably has the better points upside. Value adjusted. Again, don't go trading seconds for any of them, really, but especially for Wicks. He's more of a third. Good people greater than, and just having fun. The thing about doing that at the Expo, if you get the chance, you meet someone and a whole group of you want to go and get Waffle House or something, it's almost also the atmosphere. Like, don't get me wrong, the Expo is professional, it's awesome looking, it's active, it feels there's a lot of energy going on there. And I'm not a lot of energy person, whereas when people just hang out at a regular old spot, that's more my speed. I was a quiet room guy at parties, and that's what I enjoyed as well. JJ is probably the pick, to be fair. I've talked to JJ before, and I would say the enjoyment of it is somewhat muted by the fact you're just sitting there the whole time thinking, wow, he's like a real person. He's just sitting there talking. And it completely distracts you from the fact that, you're doing a thing. Everyone talks about their top five at a position, and they tend to be pretty milquetoast. Who are your top 6 to 15 wide receivers? Or maybe who do you have ranked higher that might be noticeably different? I don't know. I've really got to update my rank sheet. I can take a look. Last time I updated it, and I think I talked about this last stream, and every stream, because it's really the essential question. Stop blabbering and tell me who to get. Like, who's the guy you want to get? But I just increasingly don't play, as you know, fantasy football that way. But I really should update this ADP because it's changed a lot. Sorry, this is my value one. This isn't the one I need. My ranks versus consensus tends to be where I look at this. You know that, Zach. Mainly because ADP is good. I like it for a lot of reasons. In Dynasty, it still moves a little slow. Whereas something like Keep Trade Cut or other versions of ADP, they're a little more active, a little more up to date. I don't find conform to what a league does a lot in Dynasty well. Whereas if you look at the rankings of 7, I think of us do it right now, Superflex, that's 7 very active Dynasty owners, essentially. That's all we are when we're doing rankings for DLF. We're not some level of expert that you're not, but they are essentially doing their own version of ADP much more regularly. We update our ranks much more regularly than... is the idea, then ADP can update just because the logistics of organizing mock drafts for DLF. And so when you're comparing ranks or your preference, I would look at the consensus, and I do, of rankers. And if you don't like DLF, use whatever site you use, especially if you do multiple people's ranks, and then you can create a consensus rank. And I think that's a good way of looking at it. So if I rank, let's go smallest to largest, consensus rank wide receivers for DLF in the top 12. Last time I updated, which is apparently back in June. Man, I really got to get back into this. The season's nearly here, Peter. It's Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown, AJ Brown, Puka Nacua, again, milk toast. Marvin Harrison Jr., consensus, that's interesting, has already put him in the top 12. He's actually 7th overall. I have him 11th, so I have him in the top 12 because, that value can happen. But I'm noticeably lower on him. Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Jalen Waddle. Am I still in the top 12? Yeah, Tyreek Hill, and then Malik Neighbors also getting the top 12 mention. Nice, all right, bad even on those. So the players I'm lower on are Tyreek Hill, because I think it's better to be out a year earlier than wait till everyone says he's old. No, trade him now, and that'll be in this season at the end of the season, so I want to be out a little bit now in the Dynasty. If your team's good, there's no reason not to get rid of Tyreek Hill, don't get me wrong, but if there's any kind of a window where value is of importance to your Dynasty team at this moment, now's the time to be really thinking about Tyreek Hill in order, because even though his points will remain, his value will drop off. Is why. So Tyreek Hill, Marvin Harrison Jr., Puka Nacua, I'm notably lower on in terms of overall pick, not in terms of top 12. I'm just lower on wide receivers. And those are the two that stand out as players that I'm particularly low on. In replacement of them, if I organize by my own ranks, and the two that show up are Devontae Smith. I have him ranked 10th overall. Consensus has him ranked 13th. And that's an important, I think, when I can compare ranks logarithmically, which simply means a curvy line instead of a straight line, right? Because it's more important to have a difference in rankings between 1 to 12 than 20 to 30, because down there, the value difference is fairly moot, and there's not actually much significant difference between you and whoever's ranking him 30th, right? But 13th to 10th, I think, is a significant value tier. So Devontae Smith, I seem to be notably higher on than everyone else, and I have him in the top 12. And the other guy I have in the top 12 that consensus doesn't is no one. I just shifted him around a little bit, apparently. Yeah, it's Devontae Smith. Let me see. I can probably come up with a slightly better one than that. I can probably come up with more than that if we look at consensus ranks. Let's do that and look at wide receivers. Yeah, let's organize by my ranks. Why not? Amon-Ra St. Brown is one of the guys I've shifted up significantly. Garrett Wilson, Jalen Waddle, and Devontae Smith. Those seem to be my hottest. But outside of Devontae Smith, I have no one in the top 12 that no one else does. A function of ranks. I'm not stupid. I don't think I would value Chris Olave quite this way. But I do like him, and I don't want to be outvalued on Chris Olave because he's a good young player who gets targets, and I like those things. So I'm basically just taking the consensus rank there. It's the same with Puka Nacua. I'm a little lower on him, but I'm not going to be so drastically low that I'm going to trade him for significantly less than anyone else. It just means I'm probably more likely to trade them not based on consensus value. Garrett Wilson, the opposite. Devontae Smith, the opposite, obviously. Diggs, it's the old guys actually stand out my wide receiver ranks compared to everyone. Diggs, I'm 20% difference on than consensus. Mike Evans, 10%, and I'm higher on these guys. Keenan Allen, I'm about even, actually. No, you have to get really low. Speaking of Michael Wilson, by the way, Baker Kid, he's one of the ones who shows up. I have him ranked 70. I have him ranked 55th wide receiver overall. And consensus of him 76, so I'm like 20 spots higher than him in positional ranks, and also 30 spots higher than him in overall ranks. But yeah. Where would you rank Ayuk if he's traded to the Steelers? Again, my rank probably isn't the best barometer because I'm a little more muted on Ayuk, just because I'm a little less of a believer in that ceiling, or I'm less willing to pay for that potential extra ceiling. I think he's already back in the fourth round, which is where he was the last time everyone regretted liking Ayuk, if I remember right. And don't get me wrong, Ayuk's fine. He's perfectly great. Right now I haven't ranked. Wow. I have him ranked as a 14th wide receiver off the board. 41 overall. Consensus has him 37th off the board, but again, 14th wide receiver off the board. I just lower wide receiver ranks in general. Would he change much? No, I think he'll be top 15 wide receiver, even if he's on the Steelers. He's young, he's good. And frankly, the Steelers are not a terrible offense, especially for wide receivers to end up on. So I tell you what would happen while me and Zach are on Dynasty grind streams and I get questions. The guys right around him are Malik Neighbors, DK Metcalf, Jordan Addison, even Michael Pittman, T. Higgins, and Tyreek Hill. And we be in the camp of, I want to segue over to one of those and get something, or more often than not, switch that value over to a different position. And if the value jumps more than that. I traded Donald Mooney for Tyler Conklin today. Okay. Big money trades happening in my league. Those are actually the best trades, though. It's just a little activity. It keeps the league moving. It makes other people think, I haven't looked at the trade bait in a while. Maybe I'll do something. I think those trades are actually more important than you giving it credit for. But yeah, perfect good trade. Baker Kid, 10 team, 1 QB, start 10 PPR. With Kyler as your other QB, would you give up Stroud, Judy for Trevor Lawrence? Pollard 25 first and 25 third. What I have doesn't really affect what I'll do in trade. It does affect the direction I want to go with what I'm getting in trades, if that makes some sort of sense. In this case, Kyler is a great QB, by the way. Stroud for Trevor Lawrence plus a pick. And Pollard's a very fine running back ad right now. Yeah, I think I would do that. I think my problem with this, if I have one, is that Stroud's like the hot topic QB right now. Isn't he like third overall in consensus? Some people have him up there with Allen and Mahomes. Yeah, top 5 at least by consensus. And those are reasonable active dynasty. Again, why I like using the consensus. And I just think maybe you're not getting enough out of it. Stroud's so hot right now. He's been hot all offseason. Too hot. He's been in a good sell window. And I like Trevor Lawrence, but I think Trevor Lawrence and Stroud have similar value ranges, if you know what I mean. Stroud obviously had a better first season, and that's remarkable and why he's up there. But like, I want to segue into an older guy, maybe people a little lower on. So Justin Herbert, you're thinking more competitive, so maybe not. Lamar Jackson, that'd be a good way to go. And I think you will be getting slightly more points per game outcome for a very similar value trade. But this trade is perfectly fine, and Trevor Lawrence keeps your years. Basically, Trevor Lawrence and Stroud, difference in years likely to play in the top 12 from here on. Pretty similar, actually. Trevor Lawrence hasn't been in the league that long. Although I am old, time is different. No, Trevor Lawrence is still 24. There's almost no difference between them. In real terms, in terms of how long you can expect them to have value or be on your roster scoring points. And you're adding a first plus Pollard. Judy is a flyer at this point, more of a roster clogger than anything. So yeah, I think this trade is perfectly fine. I just shop around, I guess, is my advice. Outside of that, if this is the best trade that came your way, I think it's perfectly fine, and I'd probably do it. Although your roster will be lit sexy. Drew Sorensen Music, hey buddy. I argued with a YouTube commentator, always a good idea, that McLaurin is wide receiver 4 this year. Like, overall, they were arguing McLaurin is a top 24 wide receiver. They're smoking grass, right? McLaurin was a wide receiver 42 in points per game last year at 9.6. McLaurin's been... McLaurin? Terry McLaurin. Why does that name make no sense to me all of a sudden? Yeah, we're talking about the Washington guy, right? He's been in the top 24 before. I think it's in his range of outcomes. I think him being at the top 4 wide receiver overall is, yeah, an insane level of expectation. If that's what they were saying, maybe I'm reading it wrong. They were arguing McLaurin's top 24. You were arguing were you trying to say wide receiver 40? rather than wide receiver 4. Yeah, I think putting him in the top 40 is more likely than the top 24, but it's in his range of outcomes. I don't think it's insane. But I can't think of a particular reason he should get back there this year. But he's perfectly fine wide receiver. Hopefully that answers it. I think top 40 is much more likely than top 24, but I think top 24 is insane. Top 4 is insane. I'd rather have Neighbors or Hill, but really the rest of them feel like meh versus Ayuk's potential. I get what you mean, Zach Reed from the Dynasty Dummies stream. Yeah, because if Ayuk does hit that top 12 ceiling this year, the value escalation, the expectation, the sexiness of having Ayuk on your team is certainly a ceiling. I think Neighbors is the real ceiling in that regard. If Neighbors doesn't even have to hit the top 12, like Jalen Waddle did. Just a good season this year. As exciting as I think he will be to watch, I think he has even more potential in that regard, but he is also a little less certain. Just rookie, right? I know you love him. I know he's going to be great. So yeah, I might go with that. But if forced, I'd probably say Neighbors has the better ceiling too, but maybe not. Get more for Stroud, Baker. Yeah, I said it was a little low. I think it's fine though. I do think he can squeeze more out of that stuff. Peter hit that answer out of the park. Did I? Which one? I don't care. I got one right. I'll take it. Thank you. Yes, between wide receiver 4. Yeah, okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I didn't think you were saying he was crazy because he didn't think he was top 5. That made less sense. Yeah. Same page. I really don't think top 24 is out the question for McLaurin, but he's one of those deep vets that you draft because they can. Before Darnell Mooney, but after Tyler Lockett, kind of a bet. So yeah, he's perfectly fine wide receiver who's been there before. So he always has that return range of outcomes, which is the lowest group in the top 24 or top 12. But still, rather get a guy who can do it than someone like Wicks with that ceiling. But that's kind of the way I play with that higher ceiling. Chris Godwin. He's down here in the 30s too. Deontay Johnson, much rather have him. He's in the 40s and the 30s, depending on who you look at. Yeah, those are the guys with top 24 legitimately in the range of outcomes this year. But I'm not going to tell you McLaurin can't, but I don't think it's likely. Andrew Carlson, how you doing, buddy? 12-team 1QB start 8. Studs and Duds League, nice. PPR. I have Josh Allen already. Would you trade Goff and a 25-second for a 25-second? I have no one else but Carver. It's a 1QB league, so yeah, sure, fine. You're building value here, though. You know, like you said, you're giving up probably your best fill-in QB for when Allen's not around, but that doesn't mean much to me in a 1QB start 8. You know, I'm not trying to. If starting Jared Goff as my QB2 in a 1QB league start 8 is win or lose, and I think my team has some work to do. So yeah, second is actually pretty good value return for Goff there, and a second next year as well. So that arc will take place really quickly. You'll grab a running back or a wide receiver, your favorite wide receiver in that round that year, and he'll instantly be more tradable. So all that second comes draft season in 3 months, you know. And that's it so far. I'll hang out. I'm not. I know it's going to be a shorter screen, but I don't have to run away just as soon as everyone runs out of questions. Unlike Zach, Zach will be gone by now. I love this shirt. You can't tell with my internet connection, but the white's really bright. The blue really pops. I like this shirt a lot. I was happy to find a Scott Fishbowl shirt that actually is kind of my style. The baseball shirt, kind of 3/4 length straight. I like that look. Every time I wear it, I get something on it. And it's just fresh out the wash. And I just stained it. Again, my wife hates me. A second, no way. Not in a 1QB start 8, too shallow. Well, that's my point, though. In a 1 QB start 8, what value it's got, even when he starts for you, I don't think he's doing too much. He's not doing Josh Allen level points, which is what you need for a QB to really matter. And starting Carr or Brissett in that 1 week can't start, or 1 or 2 weeks you can't start Josh Allen is perfectly fine. I don't think the value difference there is enough in that shallow of a league. However, definitely rather take the flyer on the second. I remember a second. No, it's still a 12 team, didn't he say? Yeah, 12 team. I was going to say it's a higher pick than it sounds because there's only 8 teams, but no, it's a start 8 12 team. It's still the same. But I think there's more ceiling there. In a 1 QB league, you can grab the running quarterback from that year's draft in the second round. That tends to be where they get drafted in a 1 QB and suddenly get access to that potential upside, that difference-making points, which is the only thing that really matters in a QB position in a 1 QB, especially start 8. I would say especially since it's start 8, but that's the way I think of it. And your job is to reject it, the parts that you don't like or you don't think fit your playing style. But favorite second-year breakout? That's meant to be the research I'm doing. The last 4 podcasts I did outline my breakout process, and then I was made to immediately apply it to this year and then say, I have yet to do it. I think Jordan Addison still. From what I remember in the research, this is a wide receiver breakout year, and Jordan Addison's in the best career year with the best range of outcomes from his rookie season. He was a little touchdown dependent, but I think we can understand where that came from. And I still think he was good regardless. If not Addison, the only reason I'm caveating is because I hate legal troubles, man. I mean, he does probably too, don't get me wrong. But like I can't, there's no variable I can use for that. Well, because it was only this type of crime, it's unlikely this is ever going to reoccur. I don't know. Josh Downs is probably my second one. He's the guy I'll snag up late. I think Michael Wilson is good. I think he's a good name to grab down there, Baker Kid, from what you were saying earlier. He's the lesser talked about version of it, but I think Josh Downs was he's a shinier version of it, and I don't think there's a lot of no one's thirsty over Josh Downs from what I see. And I think he had a really solid rookie season. He's got a Tyler Boyd range of outcomes, which personally was like those are the guys I seek out. Volume, targets, people don't like them for some reason. Boyd hit in his third year after a decent rookie season and a terrible second season, just for some context. But I still think Downs is interesting going in after this year. But yeah, if we're talking running backs, I guess I should do some of that research. I've mostly spent my fantasy time separating out my breakout research from my main database because it was just getting too much to run all at once. And I just got that done a day or two ago. I also separated the value part of my database. I hate separating them because then I'll change something about the database and the other versions don't have that change, and it's a nightmare for me personally. But there we go, breakout data. This might actually open up where I shortened it. All right, breakout trends for 2024. Year over year. Breakouts. Okay. So last year, let's just start there. Yeah, the average top 12 breakout quarterback is around 22%. And last year we had 41% of the top 12 be breakouts. So we're actually expecting slightly less quarterback breakouts this year compared to last year. The average is about 2.7. So we'll probably still see about 2 quarterbacks in the top 12 for the first time. But I think it's more likely to be 2 than it was 4, like it was last year. Running backs, typically about 42% of the top 12 players are actually breakouts, finishing there for the first time. So about 5 players, give or take 40%. It's about 5 players. Last year it was 66%. Now, like I warned last offseason, not all good breakout years at running back produce good running backs in terms of people thirsty for them in value. Like a lot of those breakouts are James Cook last year, or players that are lower drafted that you don't expect to repeat or repeat very often. So that's some context, but that's why last year was a good breakout year for running back, but we really didn't feel like we got a lot of good running backs or have a lot of good running backs right now. Either way, I would expect fewer running back breakouts because I am kind of applying regression analysis to this kind of research. And I'd expect it to be more like 5, which again is still a lot, but it's running back and that's the way it works. And then it was, 6 or 7 last year. So I'm expecting it to be a lower breakout year. It might be a better quality running back breakout year. And again, that caveat always matters. At wide receiver, well, there's almost no such thing as a bad or that bad value top 12 breakout year. It's slightly different if you follow the dynasty trends on top of this stuff. Last year, we only saw 25% of the top 12 players were in the top 12 for the first time, what I define as a breakout. The average is about 37%, so it's about 10% less. In other words, instead of 4 to 5 players breaking out into the top 12, it was instead more like 3 to 4. I could put an exact number on that. I don't know why I gave a range. So I expect breakouts to actually be more common this year in terms of players finishing in the top 12 for the first time at wide receiver. And remember, most players break out in the top 12 in their third career year. The second most is in their second career year. And those 2 years account for about 70% of all breakouts into the top 12. And so those second and third year players are players you really should be chasing this year. Also rookies, but I really can't apply this research or this kind of research to rookies because they have no what they did the previous year kind of stuff. Still, like the Addisons, the Michael Wilsons, the Josh Downs, even the Wicks, if that's your flavor, I think they're worth chasing this year because a lot more players are going to finish in the top 12 than we saw last year. And we always love those kind of years. Same with the rookies, same with Neighbors, same with Harrison. And again, these are all broad strokes. Tight end, top 12 isn't really where it's at, but if you go to top 5, it's too small a target to hit, I find, following year-over-year targets. But for the sake of it, 33% of the top 12 at tight end are typically breakouts, finishing in the top 12 for the first time. And around 32% of the top 12 last year were there for the first time. So it's about an even year. I don't see any trend of whether it should be more, should be less this year. Now, if you go to top 5, which you shouldn't, because again, it's too small a target. I'm always talking about this at wide receiver, but I did recently try and plug this in. This is weird. Average. Okay, yeah, that's weird. Sorry. And I haven't finalized the table, which is why I'm taking a second here. But typically inside the top 12, apparently, although I haven't verified this because it's a new section of the table, only about 3%. That doesn't make sense. 3% of the top 5? That's not even a player. Yeah, I can't do it right now. Do I have any other tables that might do it for me? No, top 5 is really not something I chase a lot, but a tight end is the only thing that matters. Okay. On average, about one of the top 5 tight ends, looking at it, very scatterbrained. No, that's not true. Let me read it to you. In 2018, let's start there. 3 of the top 5 were actually breakouts in the top 5 at tight end. In 2019, it was 2. In 2020, it was 3. Over the last 3 years, we've seen 2 players break into the top 5 for the first time. In other words, what I think I'm going to come out on is that we've seen fewer top 5 breakouts at tight end than we typically see on a year-to-year basis. Now, part of that is the stability of the tight end position that we've been talking about, the strong middle class, right? We've got a lot of great to good tight ends right now, and they're just holding the position. There's not a lot of room for breakouts, especially considering the difficulty of breaking out the tight end position. They're less common in general. But 2 in 3 years versus 3 being more closer to the average in a single year probably means we should be expecting some tight end breakouts soon. And that's kind of true when you look at the landscape. The best tight ends in the room or in any room right now are Travis Kelce, George Kittle, Mark Andrews. I don't care what anyone tells you about Sam Laporta or Kyle Pitts or Evan Ingram. They're all good, don't get me wrong, but they haven't established being good for long enough that I would put them in the conversation with those 3 tight ends who have been doing what they've been doing, but better for multiple seasons already. Now, all of them can do it, don't get me wrong, but let's not lose track of who the guys are. It's like saying, Puka Nakua is greatest now, therefore Justin Jefferson isn't better. No, Justin Jefferson isn't better. Let's just have it that way. Having said that, all of them have been doing for multiple prime years. There's relatively few prime years left on some of their average career arcs, even when looking at the greats. I could pull that up, actually. I don't know why I'm slowing the stream down to do a bit of a podcast, but there you go. Because I didn't do it for my actual podcast. Yeah, prime years left at tight end. By the age of 30, you've basically got 2 left. And all of those guys are 30 or over, if I remember right. Andrews might be a little bit younger, 28, 27. But still, we're looking at 2 or 3 years left at max for most of those guys. So it wouldn't be unusual for 1 or 2 of them to drop off over the next couple of seasons. Not immediately right now, so Travis Kelce, especially if you need points. But am I expecting them to be around till 2029? Probably not. Could he be? Yeah, sure. Tight end's fucking weird and he's really good. So don't expect it, but know that the chances get ever increasingly more likely as well to his retirement or his decision not to play, or because he's having a hell of a life as it is, or he starts a lilo farm in Fiji or whatever else. That being the case, with 3 years of low breakout potential in the top 5, even though it's that smaller of a target, I think some of these young guys coming out that definitely have the potential to be that next class of tight ends that just dominate the position is really interesting. What I don't know yet, because I've rarely looked at the top 5, is what flavor or what's the nature of those. I do know players like George Kittle, Travis Kelce, and Mark Andrews all did it and established it very early in their career. But again, this is part of the trouble of seeking such a small group. I don't know if that's just happens to be those 3. Jimmy Graham, Rob Gronkowski kind of did it as well. But again, then we're just looking at a sample of 5, and we can probably come up with a grand sample of around 10 in the last 50 years. So finding trends to what those type of players usually do is always dubious, to be clear. So could Mark Andrews, Trey McBride, Kyle Pitts, and Sam Laporta be the new crew? Yes, especially since Sam Laporta, like that group I was just talking about, established it very, very early, and Brock Bowers is coming in with that range of potential from his rookie profile as well. I'm not at the end of that research yet, but what I would say is all of those guys have a higher breakout potential into the top 5, a significant breakout. Many of them are finished in the top 5, but like a Travis Kelce level, different points making potential. This is a more likely year for that to happen than any other year when you look specifically at the top 5. So, who's my second favorite breakout year candidate? It's probably a tight end if it's not Jordan Addison or Josh Downs. It's not quarterback. I think we've had our fill of quarterback breakouts recently, even though that doesn't mean Williams and Daniels aren't going to be great. But we're looking at the average and where to establish our baseline, or my baseline. And they should be and probably will be great. But I'm a little bit more comfortable with the guys who are already there at quarterbacks. Breakouts, they've kind of already broken out. We saw that 3 or 4 years ago, and Dak and Murray and Burrow and Herbert have been dominating the last few years since that most recent arc. There's relatively little reason to panic and start trading for the quarterbacks that came out in the new rookie class during that period. And they're still going to do that, to be fair, because of the length of quarterback. So quarterback isn't really where it's at for breakouts. Running back, we should expect fewer breakouts. Again, that doesn't mean we won't get higher quality breakouts. A running back that breaks out this year might be Breece Hall level, instead of 4 or 5 James Cooks, and so there's no reason not to like second-year breakouts, but I'd probably put it on the back burner in terms of what is my favorite or least favorite. That leads us to wide receiver, who I already mentioned my 2, and tight end. But where I haven't really finished that research, I can't really... Jake Ferguson, I don't know. I know I'm picking up a lot of... I've picked up some Ingram. I've picked up a lot of Kittle over the last few years. But he's hardly a breakout. So I guess I haven't targeted tight end breakouts because I'm not done with it yet. It's mostly been Kittle, Ingram, Jake Ferguson, where I didn't pick him up off the waiver wire, which was rare. But yeah, tight end might be where you're looking for the undervalued breakout just because of where the position is. hope that this, I know that's not like, ask an actual decent content creator or streamer, they'll be like, yeah, Brandon Ayuk for the win. It's just not what I do. Speaking of which, I do have, this should be possible to look up right now. Yeah, my tight end table looks nasty because it doesn't know what to do. It's like, Kobe Parkinson, Noah Gray, what do you want from me, man? If you follow the other positional trends, tight end, it does not work. And I don't know what the tight end positional trends are. Wide receiver, which will excite some people, I know, and I hate being on that particular bandwagon, but Drake London has I still have a little bit of research to do on that. Yeah, he's probably got he's in the top 4 group of most likely break out the wide receiver position. I think his value is already there. That's why I'm sounding bored, because if you're already paying for it, what good does it note and that it's actually, yeah, it's a pretty good year for Drake London to have his best year this year. Yeah. Unfortunately, you're paying for it as if he already has done it. So what's the value? Chris Olave, George Pickens, Garrett Wilson, Jordan Addison. And the top 4 group at wide receiver. And again, Addison is the one that stands out to me there because his value's been lower consistently. And again, he's entering that second year. It's not the most common top 12 breakout year, but it's the next common, and the difference is like 3% in terms of the percentage of top 12 breakouts that actually possesses. I wish he'd kept his nose clean this offseason. Zay Flowers isn't far behind. He's in the next group with Rashee Rice, Jaden Daniels, and Romeo Doubs. So they're all good breakout potentials, and we're talking a lot lower values here, and they're entering good breakout arcs in a pretty reasonable breakout year for wide receivers. Now the vets, the Brandon Ayuk tier, if you will, come in slightly less likely again because they just represent a smaller percentage of the group of top 12 breakouts in general. But in with Ayuk is Michael Pittman, Darnell Mooney. Again, the table doesn't know, all right? Jay Davis, it doesn't know. John Johnson, it doesn't know. Jacoby Myers, he already had a top 12 season, I thought. No, he's just had 3 top 36, apparently. Okay. And T. Higgins and Marcus Brown. Of that group, and Judy, I guess, technically, and McLaurin, actually. Look at that. Of that group, I think Marcus Brown's the most interesting because of the situation. And Marcus Brown's had a top 24 season, and he's been undervalued even when doing that. He's been in a top 12 pace twice. Do I think he's the new Chiefs Tyreek Hill? No, I think if anyone's going to do anything like that, it's Xavier Worthy. But price adjusted before, I always like kind of invested in Marcus Brown a little bit. So instead of Drake London, I prefer Jordan Addison, right? And instead of we're talking about Brandon Ayuk, I prefer Marcus Brown. But there are plenty of names here that you could prefer. Like again, that guy on YouTube talking to you prefers Terry McLaurin. I don't wave him off, but I too, like you, look at it and like just following the actual career. Yeah, okay, yeah, maybe, but yeah, I'm not going to wave away the potential, but he doesn't excite me. T. Higgins, maybe. He's always had a little more potential than he's put on the field, I think, for fantasy. I think Pittman being in here is interesting, but I definitely think we're more likely seeing his ceiling. And in terms of percentage of players that break out into the top 12 later career who are finishing inside the top 24, it actually becomes an increasingly large part of the group. What I say early is if you break out into the top 24 in the first year, that's a less common group to break inside the top 12 because like you got the volume you were meant to get and you did top 24 with it, that's probably what you're going to do. Whereas if you get in the top 36, you probably produce a partial season where you developed into the role. Now you're going to get your volume jump and you break out into a higher level, top 24. That's not exact science, but it tends to follow the percentages pretty well. But the deeper into a career you get, I'm pretty confident. It's been a while since I looked at this. Let me scan across just to check myself. I think it's increasingly more likely that a wide receiver breaking out into the top 12 has a top 24 season under their belt already. Top 24, but top 12. Where's the wide receivers? Should all be here. Okay. Yeah, this table is not user friendly. Yeah. After the third year. Well, let me go from the start. In their second year, the players that break out into the top 12, 47% of them, so still nearly half, but below half, had a top 24 season before breaking out in their second season. 52% in their third season already had a top 24 season under their belt. 56 in the fourth year, 55 in the next year, 57, 57. So if you're going to break out into the top 12 later career, having a top 24 under your belt puts you in the majority group rather than the minority group, if that makes sense to you. It does in my head. So players like Pittman, players like London, not London, sorry, Ayuk. Yeah, this is probably, if they're going to break out into the top 12, you'd rather bet 5th, 6th, 7th career year than you would 2nd, 3rd. So it's actually a pretty good year for them as well. Again, I'm just talking at this point, so I'm going to move on. In a 4,000 team league, start 11 with Superflex, would you start Jerome Ford or Chase Brown as your next flex? I'd have to check tape. No one. I'd leave the league. There you go. No, Chase Brown, high potential. There you go. Drew Sorensen music. A manager keeps trying to trade me Parker Washington. Bless him, eh? I'm rejecting. That's a correct move, right? He wants Zach Ertz. I mean, correct move is whatever you want for your team, to be fair. I don't think it's a particularly tempting trade. I'm not particularly in on Washington. I don't know. It feels like you need a conversation. Like, why are you trying to trade me this guy? No, if he just wants to... Does he want Zach Wilson or does he just want to get rid of Parker Washington? You're right. The right move is to ignore and move on. This isn't going to happen. But part of me has been Dynasty house-brained. I'm like, can I work something out here where I actually get a value? And deep down enough, if you add something... If he's got a Michael Wilson, maybe you could work out a trade, or one of your favorite tight end sleepers, or someone that you are actually interested in. Maybe you can get him Zach Ertz with a bit higher value trade. But yeah, the correct answer is probably just keep rejecting. I am always tempted because in my leagues, someone trying to make a trade isn't exactly an everyday occurrence. So I'm normally desperate to try and make something happen. But don't let that desperation make you do something. Zach Ertz is probably much better, as much as he is, roster spot than Mr. Washington. Zach Harris, how do we feel about Zach Moss and Chase Brown competition? I don't feel much one way or the other, to be clear, to be honest. What would you pay him rookie picks for either of them? I wouldn't send rookie picks for this kind of thing. I can draft a running back, even this year, that I think has a chance at gaining volume at some point this season with my seconds or even with my thirds. So why would I gamble on a particular competition? I think of giving up something to do something you can already do without giving up any. And typically what I want to do with rookie picks or just value in general is grow it. I'm either trying to get rid of risk or I'm trying to increase my points per game. I don't sleeper. I secretly think that Zach Moss, and not so secretly because it's all over Twitter and everyone is following the same thread, is going to win that competition and get volume. Could easily happen, right? But why am I going to bet that I'm right when I could do something that is more likely to definitely improve my team, even if it's more expensive? Like the goal here is to improve my team, either in points per game or value, and there are 100 different moves. They can definitely do that instead of maybe do that. I get that slightly offbeat, and I get that everyone just wants to talk about actually the conversation of who's better and who's going to win is actually the fun, but I don't have any insight. I'm neither player. I'm not watching their practices. I'm not in the coaching room, and I think most of it's just hyperbole spitting. I think most of the trends we try to follow, like who's getting a certain amount of reps, I don't think they've ever borne fruit outside of... probably what Zach Reed would do, is watching them and making a decision about what you think about their talent. There's not much to go on. What I would default to if I had to choose between them in a draft, as it were, like these are the only two picks I'm definitely going to take in this 20th round or whatever, I would look at value ceiling. And I think there's not much in it, but I think that Brown is earlier on in his career, and if he earned the job and did pretty well at it, you might have a better trade window than if Moss did. And Moss has done it before, to be fair. And he did it with Indianapolis for a little stretch there as well. So, but dynasty-wise, I'd be more interested a little bit in Brown than Moss. But I don't feel like I have any insight in what actually will happen, because they both could easily do it based on the little I know of what they're capable of. That's why I go with it. Again, I wish I had better content creator. This guy's going to win, but I don't. And I found following the things to have mixed results. And so I found my own way, and that's to think as I just did. Justin Jefferson or Tyreek Hill in Dynasty? Justin Jefferson. It's actually not too insane question, but Jefferson should have more value. You can trade Jefferson for Hill, but you need a plus. And that could be a good move for a team that's just got Tyreek Hill, right? Or the team that's just got Justin Jefferson, but is relatively competitive with older guys. You just need to add some value somewhere so you could trade down to a Tyreek Hill who's actually probably got similar, if not higher, points per game ceiling this year, and likely to get there as well, just like Jefferson is. But you also had a draft pick in the future. Yeah, depending on how you build teams, it could easily be a question. I get that you're probably just making fun of me. Hill scores 19.2 points per game. Jets 16.8 points per game. Yeah, but that's like the Jets. And yeah, Hill's points are fantastic for fantasy. But his value's low. You just got less of it. We got fewer years of it. If Downs is a year 2 breakout, doesn't that almost necessitate Anthony Richardson breaking out? No, but I do get what you're saying. Yeah. Plenty of mediocre quarterbacks have produced top 24 breakouts, and again, I'm not expecting top 12. But no, not all top 12. Not all top 24 wide receivers have top 12 quarterbacks, but I get what you mean. I don't think that's bad reasoning in this instance, because if Richardson is doing enough to get Downs into the top 24, and he's more, like I said, I think he's more of a Tyler Boyd volume guy, then he must be performing in the passing game sufficiently enough, not great, but sufficiently enough that his legs are going to propel him into a much higher breakout, right? We expect him to be mostly legs, and if he can do decent with his passing, suddenly you have Lamar Jackson level performance, even though I think Lamar Jackson is good. We don't need Lamar Jackson level to get to Lamar Jackson level, right? So yeah, I actually don't think that's terrible reasoning, but here's the difference. And here's what I'm saying, or here's what I'd say. Josh Downs cost you like the wide receiver 50 pick, and Anthony Richardson cost you like what, a top 6 dynasty pick in Superflex. Like, if it happens, I'll be happier to benefit from whatever Josh Downs gets out of it, than to take the risk of Richardson. But yeah, fair point. How do you feel about London? Like I just mentioned, I think he's in a very likely breakout year. I think he's been a very solid introduction to the NFL. I think the fact he's only had a top 36 season entering his 3rd season, it's actually a little sus. We're right on the line here where you should have a top 20. You're more likely to have a top 24 breakout before breaking out into the top 12, but he's right on the line. The 3rd year is the most common breakout year for wide receivers. I can actually look this one up. This is one of the tables I made user-friendly. If I can switch. Used to be in my database tool. Everyone complained it was making it burdensome. Oh, no. Oh, that's all. Okay. Top 24 breakouts. 8% of them happen year 1. 22% of top 12 breakouts at wide receiver happen in year 2. 22%. It's not bad, right? 32% of them happen in year 3. So there's actually a bigger difference there than I remember. It's like a 10% difference. Ayuk's entering that 3rd year. And again, it's not concrete level analysis, but I do like looking at the most common. In your 3rd year, 56% of the players to break out into the top 12 in their 3rd year had a top 24 season under their belt. That's my little bugaboo about London. If you're going to be a 3rd year breakout, I would almost have expected more from you up to this point. Having said that, he's in a very good breakout year and a positively changing situation, and he has performed well. I was going to say adequate there, and then that feels like it was just mediocre. Yeah, most wide receivers that are drafted don't do as well as London has done in his situation or in fantasy football in general. So London looks like a pretty good bet for a breakout. The reason I got a bugaboo is just that little top 24 thing in terms of what typically happens by year 3. Like CeeDee Lamb was a top 3 breakout year, the most likely top 12 breakout that I have ever seen entering his 3rd season. And everyone thought he couldn't get there because he hadn't had more than a 17% target share. Most haven't. And London's in that category. he hasn't hit the volume trends that, 20% plus the most have either. But Lamb had been more concrete, more solid, and earned more of that offense by himself before year 3, as most have when they break out into the top 3. In the group, though. And London is already in the group, which means we should be drafting him like he has top 12 potential. But we shouldn't be drafting him as confidently as we should have been drafting CD Lamb, if that makes sense, because of what he'd accomplished to that point in his career. So I like him a lot. I think he's worthy of the hype. I think he's in that conversation. Who did I mention? With George Pickens and Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson. It's a heavy group for a breakout, and 2 of those carry really hefty draft capital. Olave and Wilson, because they have the top 24, and they should be more highly drafted, by the way. But between Pickens and London, I will take the value difference, if you know what I mean. I think they're both entering good career years. Both have had top 36 breakouts, not top 24, which puts them in that 44% category. But just to get in that category, there's only 2 of them in there this year. You don't want to not take the chance that one of them's going to do it. But I would take the value difference with just because of the hype on London. But both are in the category. And again, my answer actually is, especially before the legal trouble, is I'm a little more interested in those second-year players in general. But this year in particular, Addison Flowers, Rashee Rice. I guess if you want to go to Jaden Reed and Romeo Doubs, you can. Romeo Doubs? No, he's entering his 3rd career year. It's for that's why he gets in that group. Romeo Doubs was lower drafted, and they have slightly slower arcs, so the percentages changed a little bit, and he put him right next to that category with the second-year players. My table is working. I was worried there for a second. Oh, sorry, I missed the second part of it. I have him on a couple of teams in the middle of rebuilds, and I have the huge urge to try and get out. I would at least test the market. If you find someone in there who recognizes, and it is legit, you're not trade destroying them, you're not mega braining them. I know he won't, so I will trade him to you. Like he has a significant shot, and you can trade him as if he has a significant shot. And if I had Drake London on teams, which I do not, I would definitely try. But again, what I'd say to you, I'm literally about to say it. I don't even know what that phrase means at this point. Is sell him as if his ADP is real, because it is. Yeah, he's a very good breakout candidate. The guy getting them is getting a very good wide receiver so far in a very likely breakout year. But what you're looking for, because of the way Dynasty works, is someone who really likes Drake London. Because despite that being common, if people aren't in on London, they'll be like, Atlanta or something, or some such shit. Which is why even players I think are overvalued in ADP actually turn out to be really good trades in an actual Dynasty league, which is why we like doing the grind. It's why we like doing those Rate My League shows, because talking like this, like, you should trade Drake London, but I need to see the trade to say for sure. Because in your league, you might try to trade for Drake London and they offer you a second and something, right? In which case, no. You should be getting... Again, this is, the problem with talking on that 30,000 foot view, as Zach says, 2 firsts of value. Now, that doesn't mean 2 first-round picks, because who wants to trade that? But that level of value, right? Roughly whoever you value as a first or as a second, gives you some guide to the type of trade I'll be looking for, but I'm not going to tell you that's exactly, because I like some players better than their current value or what you think of as the current value. But that would be my guide. I would trade Drake London, but you're looking for something that equals in the range of 2 first-round picks in very few things, right? You don't want 10 players all worth a third. You want a player plus a first, or you want a second plus a really good player, but not phenomenal. Yeah, but I would try to trade him, but don't trade him for trading's sake. And especially if you have multiple copies, you're playing Dynasty, at a certain point, it becomes about diversification if you play it enough. So yeah, I'd look for it. Pardon me. Can we coin a player getting back into the top 24 as a break-in instead of the more traditional breakout? Actually, I call them returns and returning players. That's what I do because I count those guys. Where's the easiest table to talk about that? Yeah. Just want to talk about wide receivers. I do it for all positions, so the table gets pretty heady. Or heady is one word, and mess is another. Which is kind of part of the reason it's not easily accessible. I don't have it somewhere you can go and look. I just talk about it. Let's see. Wide receivers. I need to. Can I just look at no? Anyway, returning players, wide receivers, 19% on average since 2010. So a pretty decent sample. About 19% of the top 12 wide receivers are actually players who have been in the top 12 and are returning or breaking in, or whatever you want to call it, back into the top 12. Top 24 returning players at wide receiver are about 10% of the group on average. So about 10% of the top 24 are players who have been in the top 24, but then fell out of the top 24 for at least 1 year and then came back into it. So Terry McLaurin or Deontay Johnson, I think, was in the top 24 last year, or anyone that has been, or Donald Mooney, before, they all have this 10% shot, like 10% of the top 24 are returning players who have been there before. But remember, they only have to have been separated it from 1 year. So a lot of that is some player missed time for an injury, or several years for an injury, or just haven't quite been on the field a lot because the team was being silly in one particular instance. Stuff like that. But yeah, there's always, not always. Well, let's see. Last year it was about 8% of the group. Last 3 years it's been about 8% of the group. In 2020 it was 16% of the group, so twice the number of players in the top 24. It's roughly that. It's either 8% or 16%. So last 3 years it was 8%. 2020 it was 16%. 19 and 18, 8% of the top 24 returning players. And then in 2017 it was 16% again. I remember that 10% of the group is about 2.5 players, between 2 and 3. 2015 it was 16%, 8% in 2014. It's pretty consistently. Let me see. I actually can't do that math in my head right now. Yeah, it's pretty consistently between 2 and 4 players. So the last 3 years, 2 players were returning. In 2020, it was 4 players. In 2019 and 2018, it was 2. In 2017, it was 4. In 2016, it was 2. In 2015, it was 4. In 2014, it was 2. We did get 2 down years, 2013 and 2012. Low wide receiver years in general, and just before that 2014 class came in, interestingly enough, only 4%. So like a player was a returning player. But in 2011, and we're getting back in our history now, it was 12%, 8% the year before, 0% in 2009. So we're getting outside of our sample, and wide receivers, it worked a little different in terms of breakout trends, which tends to be why I go from 2010 onwards. But you can push it back to 2008 if you want. But yeah, it's between 2 and 4 players in general. Most years, it's literally 2 players or 4 players. Depending on if you like to talk about the percentage or the actual count. This year, I would expect probably 4 players to be returning players into the top 24. But top 24 is only so exciting. Inside the top 12, like I said, it's about 19% of the group, but we've been pretty consistently hitting at 16% for the last 3 years. 33% of the group in 2020. We're kind of due one of the 33% years. Hang on. So about 4 players inside the top 12 with a breakout year due. Yeah, it's between 2 and 4. And we ought to do a breakout as well. That's repeats. Yeah, the repeats last year were too high. 58% of the group, when it's usually about 40%. So I think some of our established players are not going to finish inside the top 12. We're going to see breakouts and returns a little bit more commonly. Remember, we're talking like 2 players. It's not going to revolutionize Dynasty or anything. We've seen it literally 3 times in the last 5 years. 7 years, sorry. So, but yeah, we could easily see some returns this year as well, or break-ins, to use Tacit Assassin's term. Preseason news blurb. That means something? I don't know, it depends what it is. I'm not going to tell you not to listen to any information, because part of this is just fun. We like hearing about players. We like hearing about what's going on in training camp. But there's a difference between how fun it is or just having a conversation is, or me just having a conversation about it. When I do the live streams or the Rate My League shows or content of some form, and I still think of this as content, I'm going to tell you how I think I should play it in fantasy. So unfortunately, I don't engage with the fun of it as much. But to be clear, if a news blurb has you excited, I think that's exciting too. I think it's fun to hear how well Moss or anyone is doing in practice, and they might win the job. And I want to talk about that too, and I do. When talking in this kind of context, I want to be clear, like my actionable information on those is almost nil. I think it's fun, and I think it's fun to speculate. But in terms of decisions I'll make about a fantasy team, it's kind of null and void. You use it just to re-emphasize your priors. Let's face it. If the news verb confirms my priors, it's absolutely true, and if it doesn't, then it's just news. They're going to say stuff. And it's honestly is an effective method of passing that stuff as I can. Now, some of it's different. We can listen to literally insiders, people that are in the room watching the practices. Travis May is getting more and more to be one of those guys because he's awesome and is actually trustworthy as well. I remember Matthew Berry's story where he was literally told by someone it was literally the person who ran the offense, I think, that this player was going to get the ball a lot this game. And so he went on his show and he said that, and the player got thrown the ball a lot, but didn't make any catches. So there were no plays, no points, and then the team moved off it. So some of it is, it's absolutely true, but it's not going to work out, and the team will move on so quickly it seems like it wasn't actually true. So I don't even think whether it means something or not can sometimes not pay ads. It's one of the stories I always remember Matthew Berry telling back when I used to listen to the mainstream media. I thought that was really insightful from an insight, someone literally talking to people in the room making decisions. He was like, even when you literally know what they're going to try and do, sometimes it doesn't happen. And it feels like you've lied to people. People think you don't know, or you're making stuff up. And sometimes it was absolutely true. It just didn't work out. Which is part of the trouble with the news blurts. Could be absolutely true. Could be absolutely false. Could just be hyperbole. Just could be content filling. I would enjoy it, but don't tilt over it too much because there's really no way about it. That's my 2 cents. That's what I do it. Yeah. I think I made it to 11 without Zach Reed or Dynasty Outhouse. I think that is pretty worthy engagement for someone as irrelevant as me these days. So, I'm happy. If you guys are good, I'm good. I just didn't want to miss another week, especially since I caused the last one we missed. And also, what else am I going to do on a Wednesday night? Spend it with my family? I should probably reevaluate that priority. All right, guys. I appreciate you all. Please continue to talk to Dynasty Outhouse and Tacit Assassin, even though they abandoned me on this stream. Just sold me out. No, this week they'll be at the Expo. If you're interested in going, and I'm not trying to sell it to you, I'm really not. No one makes any money off this thing as far as I can see, and especially not me. But if you just, it seems like you're interested in it, but why use your vacation time when you could use it for going to Myrtle Beach? I get it. I would say this is a great week. Check out Dynasty Outhouse. Check out Zach Reed. Those are 2 very real people, not news blurby. They're having fun. They're there. I don't know how active they'll be, but when they're around, ask them how it's doing, what they're up to, what kind of things they're doing. And that, I'm not saying that will sell it to you. I'm saying that will give you an idea of if you're actually interested in going, right? And so I actually think it's a really good time to follow your small content creators who are at the Expo, just in case you're interested in it. or have any particular interest in going ever, because now's when they're literally there. They're the most fresh. They can tell you what's going on. They can tell you if it's fun, if it's not, what kind of events, what kind of tables are at the booths. I think this is a great week to actually get some of those questions there. That's why I went. I was a little curious, but I never really admitted. I'm an inside person who doesn't like people. I don't like leaving the house. And so I never really considered it, but doing content with Zach and Dynasty and Russ, I don't know why I always use his at name, made me interested in going, right? There was someone literally there that I literally wanted to meet. Even if everything else was terrible, getting to meet those people was going to be pretty awesome. And that's what turns out most of the parts I enjoyed about the Expo was. I got to meet Casey Kasem. That was amazing. Just to say hello. And as it gets more popular, there are increasingly more popular people. Again, I'm not really built like that, but the people I just spend time talking or listening to about this little hobby of mine, the more of them that show up, like that's what made me go. And this is a good week to figure out if they go, if they're around, but you'd never see them. And I think if you talk to Zach and Russ, you'll find they're standing right in the middle of it, talking to anyone that comes up to them. And so it's a good week to actually go see if it's an experience you might be interested in. That's my last thought. Whether this is a week for it, I think it's a good time to go hit them up, go follow their feed, see what pictures they're taking, because you'll find most of the people that you actually might want to meet are literally just standing in the middle of it, hoping to talk to you or anyone else that shows up, or not, and just pay attention to me, because I will not be there, and that is obviously my preferred preference. But yeah, thanks everyone. I'm out of here. Thanks for checking out the stream, despite the star being missing, both stars this week being missing. Appreciate you all, and we'll talk to you again, I hope, at least me, same time next week. Good luck. Have fun. Enjoy the preseason news as much as you can. It's almost the most fun part. The minute it stops being news or hypotheticals, then it's just a thing that happened. And I find realities far less interesting than what we think might happen, personally. But that's me. See you later.